What's up, Auburn? Pastor Crespo here with Pastor Dustin Hall of the Try Jesus Auburn podcast. How are you doing, Dustin?
I'm doing well.
All right. Well, we have Q&A time.
Yeah,
Are you ready?
absolutely.
All right. So for our listeners and those who are listening or watching, these questions really are taken from the longer series that we've done.
Yes.
Where we were going to different places in Auburn and then tying them to some biblical theme or thought. And so I have a question for Pastor Dustin to answer today. And Dustin, it's going to be all yours. Do a good job.
Pray for me.
Yeah. Well, before we do that, we were talking before we came on that you do have a little thing going on with your eye. What's going on?
My eye's red. I think it's allergies.
It's allergies. So, okay.
Yeah, Miguel didn't poke me in the eye,
and neither did your wife,
No,
right? Okay.
no.
All right. Treat her well. Treat her well. All right. Sorry, Mrs. Hall. All right. Question for you, Dustin. Now, This is taken from one of the episodes that we did.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of a good question. Many people have asked it, but sometimes in different ways. Why does evil still exist? So here's a question. If Jesus conquered Satan on the cross, why does evil still exist today?
Man, that's a great question. And I think even people that aren't Christians who are just living their life and they look around and see the condition of the world and say, you know, if there is a God, why doesn't he care?
Yeah.
Why is the world the way it is?
So there's a reason not to believe in God is because there is evil.
Right. And I think all of these questions, you know, we don't have time to answer all of them and all the angles that we could come from. But I would encourage people to go back to our original series that we did, those first 13 episodes.
Yeah.
Episode 6, I think it's called The Origin of Evil.
Okay.
We answer that and talk about that, the condition of our world and where it is now.
Yeah.
But this is a little more specific question. You know, so Christians believe that Jesus died on the cross and he forgave us of our sins and overcame the power of evil there. Well, then why is evil still around?
Right.
And the disciples asked a pretty similar question to that. And Jesus tells a parable that's really important. I don't think they probably fully understood what he was saying when he was telling most of his parables.
Yeah.
But he tells this parable about this guy who owns a field, and he plants his field perfectly. You know, all the right seed, he tills it the right way. You know, it's taken care of. Everything's done properly. And when the workers are sleeping, an enemy comes along and sows weeds. So he's throwing some seed down there of some weeds.
Yeah.
And the weeds grow up, and the workers look around and say, "Hey, what happened here?" And so to define some of these symbols here, God is the one who owns the field and sowed it perfectly.
Yeah.
The workers are us, and the enemy is the devil and those that kind of participate with his way of life. And Jesus says something interesting. So we have that verse. Let's pull that up now.
Okay.
So from Matthew chapter 13, beginning in verse 28, it says, "He said to them, an enemy has done this." So they were asking the question, where did all these weeds come from? Why is our field the way that it is? Like we're asking that question, why is our world the way that it is? An enemy has done this. So the servant said to him, "Then do you want us to go and gather them?" So in other words, saying, do you want us to go weed the field, get the weeds out of the field? And Jesus says something really interesting about this. He says, "No, lest in gathering the weeds, you root up the wheat along with them."
Yeah.
That's a really interesting detail.
Well, you know, there's something interesting here. Obviously, these parables are meant to have deeper lessons. Imagine if you had a garden, Dustin, and I came in the middle of the night and I saw you planted whatever, cucumber, lettuce, and I deliberately grabbed some bluegrass or crabgrass seeds. And what does that say about me?
Yeah.
I mean, what does it say about the devil that he deliberately taints what God does?
I would say jealousy.
Yeah.
Hatred.
I mean, hate. Yeah.
Yep.
And then you're talking about this whole thing, keeping them together. I would think, though, if in gardening, my wife has a little garden. She weeds that thing regularly. But so this is a little bit counterintuitive. Jesus is not being a good gardener here. Why is that?
Seems like it.
Let him grow. It's okay.
Yeah.
What's with that?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. And there's a few things I think we can learn from that. And he says, let them grow until the harvest. So that's the end of the world. And something you know about weeds is that when you have one, they multiply, right? So Jesus gives us a timeline. He said evil is going to exist until the end of time. And if you know anything about the garden, weeds make more weeds.
Yeah.
So evil is going to spread until the end of time. That's what he's saying.
Well, why does he let it then? I mean, I think that's the question, right? Why does he let that happen?
Yeah, there's a couple things that we can learn from that, I think. Number one is he wants to give the garden enough time to mature. So this is where the illustration breaks down a little bit. But I think that he's letting things play out, number one, so that everybody has a chance. So anybody can change. He can forgive any sin. Anyone can make a different choice. They can become his follower. They don't have to be part of the weeds anymore. They can be transformed. Wow. That's the miracle of the gospel.
Man, that's deep. So you're telling me that we're kind of loosely following this because we're not following strict gardening things. But you can be at one point a tare, which is like a weed.
Yeah.
And then at another point be wheat.
Right. Transformed into wheat.
So that's why, okay.
Yep. Okay. So he's waiting for more to be saved. But also
there's hope.
Yeah, right.
There's hope.
Right. If you're watching a field, right? If you're watching a field and you're watching the weeds take over, you can see it in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
And that's what God wants us to watch happen. So he's saying, as we're looking at our world and we're seeing it's getting worse and there's more evil and there's more suffering, that should show us that the results of the evil that is in our world and the results of if we surrender our hearts over to the ways of the devil or the ways of evil, what's going to happen to us? Yeah. So there's this contrast between the wheat and the tares. And there's another interesting detail there too, is that the wheat and the tares apparently look similar, because he said, don't pull up the weeds because you might end up pulling up a wheat with it, the good plant with it.
Yeah.
So number one, I think that's because if you pull up a weed too soon in this parable, it doesn't give it a chance to turn into a piece of wheat.
Yeah.
Through that miracle of Jesus. Right. So he's letting everybody have an opportunity to start out as a tare and become wheat, right? Become his follower. But also, there are people that we may think of as evil, and actually their hearts are, we can't judge, right? We can't judge. So
that's a deep parable. That really is, there's a lot there.
There's a lot there, absolutely. And so God is the judge. We need to let him, take control of this. And he doesn't want us to go out there and by force try to judge and condemn and make these decisions, but we can see the results of evil. And that's ultimately, I think, the lesson of the parable is that as we see evil continue to compound and multiply like weeds in the field, it should be an appeal to us to say, I don't want to be a weed. I want to be wheat. I want to follow. So that the contrast between the world and this king and the devil's kingdom and the things that he set up and the way of life that he established here versus God's kingdom and the wheat and the light of the world. So light and darkness right before our very eyes. And that's what we see through the story of the Bible is God not coming in and immediately ending things, because he wants to give people more time and he wants to allow us an opportunity to choose. What kingdom do we want? Do we want the kingdom of the weeds, or do we want the kingdom of the wheat?
That's an incredibly deep parable. There are a lot there. I'm listening to you, and there are a lot of things, a lot of ways that we can take off
Absolutely,
on this. Wow, I'm trying to be careful because we could take off and turn this into a long episode. So so evil still exists, and sometimes people judge God harshly for it, but maybe in a way we should be thankful.
In a way, it's hard when we're suffering and we're the victims of this evil that's around in our world. Right. Absolutely, it's hard. It's not easy, but here's the mastermind plan that's at work.
Yeah.
The devil is the one who sowed the weeds.
He's responsible.
Right. But he has found a masterful way to get everyone to blame God for it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we suffer and we're going through something, our minds immediately go to, God, why are you doing this to me?
Mm-hmm.
Which makes us doubt who he is and what he's like, and doubt if he loves us,
Right.
that sort of thing.
Right.
So the masterful thing about this is the devil makes us suffer. He causes the suffering,
Yeah.
and then gets us to blame God for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in those moments of suffering, in those moments of questioning, we need to put the hatred and the doubt and the anger in its proper place.
Yeah. The enemy is responsible.
The enemy did this. An enemy has done this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then focus our minds on, wait a second, what does God stand for? What's his kingdom like? And that's what we see in Jesus.
Yeah.
And, we even see that in the life of Jesus. He didn't stop the evil and the violence upon his own self.
Yeah.
He suffered what we go through. He felt the pain that we endure.
Yeah.
He and far more. And he went to the point of death,
right,
to stand for a kingdom that is much greater than any of the hurt and the pain that this world can throw at us.
So I'm hearing you saying this, Dustin, and I'm gonna repeat this back to you. Tell me if I got it.
Mm-hmm.
I think as we look at this question about why does evil still exist
Mm-hmm.
after the cross, that even if I don't understand why, it's clear to see that there is a plan.
Mm-hmm.
God didn't just let evil exist because he doesn't care.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a reason for it. So even if I don't understand, or even if I don't like it,
Mm-hmm.
God letting evil exist maybe to allow me to come to a place to come to him.
Yeah, and
Wow.
exactly. I mean, and how many people listening to this podcast, if God had, 50 years ago or 20 years ago or 10 years ago said, nope, that's it.
Done.
I'm doing away with evil. How many of us would have been in the camp where the wheat or the weeds were pulled up and burnt?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have to be thankful for the process, even though it's painful.
Yeah.
We can be thankful for the process because it's a process that also allows us time to receive Jesus into our heart and transform from being a weed into the wheat.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I thank you, Pastor Hall. I hope that you've been blessed. I wish I would have had the foresight to put in there's a psalm that talks about God keeping our tears in a bottle, so that the things we cry about now, God will make it up to us, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, all right, thanks. We'll see you guys next time.